A vague disclaimer is no one's friend. This podcast will look at episodes in relation to Buffy and Angel as a whole, and therefore contains spoilers for the entirety of both series. If you haven't seen all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel the series, go and watch them before you listen to this. Remember, you've been warned.
The hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
That's why there's us, champions. We live as though the world were as it should be, to show it what it can be.
The Earth is definitely doomed.
It's Tuesday, so it must be time to return to the Hellmouth. We're going through the Buffyverse episode by episode, and a look back at Joss Whedon's iconic shows. I'm MC, and I'm here with...
Sandy.
It's David.
It's Jan.
This week, we're reviewing Gingerbread, which is episode 11 of season 3. The story was written by Jane Espenson and Thania St. John, and the teleplay was written by Jane Espenson, and it was directed by James Whitmore Jr., and originally aired January 12th, 1999. So this is the first episode that's in 1999, I believe, right?
Oh, wow.
Could be.
Yeah. And party like it's.
Yeah. I think Buffy actually makes mention of that in the prom. And also...
What, party like it's 1999?
Yeah, I think she makes mention of that in the prom. And Thania St. John's not a name that I recognize. I think this might be the only thing she did on this. Occasionally we get like those one-off writers on... Tends to be like just writing the story rather than the full script.
Yeah.
This episode starts out with Buffy out on patrol, and this is a patrol unlike any other.
And we learn suddenly slaying is not a spectator sport. Who knew?
Yes.
It's funny, because, I mean, she doesn't really have a problem with any of the Scoobs going with, but it's because it's Joyce. It's just like, right. Mom, stop hanging around here.
I just
Mom,
you're
Joyce. Embarrassing me.
You're embarrassing me in front of all those other vampires. I do love Joyce. Is like, I thought it could be something we could share. And I'm like, oh, Joyce, you're really trying there, pumpkin, but you don't get the full picture of how this works.
Which kind of will be what happens for this entire episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really does get a hard look at slaying. Like, I mean, she kind of has an idea before now that it's not pretty because, you know, she knows about, like, all of the bruises and injuries Buffy has gotten, and Buffy has told her that she died. But this is, like, it's somebody that she knows that Buffy has to kill. Then there's these bodies of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just the way they do it, the way they set up the kids, having them, like, just laid all over this, not a merry-go-round,
that spinny thing.
Yeah,
right?
I thought that was called a merry-go-round.
It is a merry-go-round? Okay.
Yeah, it's a merry-go-round.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have the little horsies.
Yeah.
But it's still a spinny thingy, merry-go-roundy-ish
It's
thing.
not a carousel, but it's a merry-go-round-ish.
It is a merry-go-round-ish thing.
Yeah. But it's, taking these really innocent people and at this really innocent place and just perverting it. And, this episode's really creepy.
Visually it's really messed up.
The initial sight of the kids is really harsh.
Yeah.
But it really, really kind of kicks you in the face.
We know what's going to happen, right? That this is a demon-y, mythological thing. But even if it wasn't, Joyce's... What am I trying to say? In this moment, Joyce's reaction is pretty... Understandable? Thank you. Understandable, right? Like, you... see that, regardless of whether there are mystical things in the world, is just super traumatizing. Right. And also, she's a mom, so I think it's doubly... Not that anybody with a heart wouldn't see small children dead on a playground and freak out, but the fact that she's a mom, I think, is an extra kick, because she really is... And so she's a very strong, protective mother, so...
It's not clear at this point, but as we will see as the episode goes on, there are clearly mystical forces involved in Joyce's reactions.
We will get into that later, but I think everything about this opening, from Joyce finding the bodies and after the opening credits when we get the police, it is shot differently than most of the things that we see on Buffy. It's more like your Law and Order Criminal Minds thing, where you're seeing like all of these police with bodies of kids, and it's like they've set up that this mystical world is still leading to dead bodies of little kids. So,
well, I mean, and I think Buffy points out that that this may not be mystical in that moment.
Yeah.
No,
You know,
Buffy,
so this
I don't think Buffy does, because I think Giles points that out to Buffy, because Buffy asks,
You're right.
what kind of demon does this? And I was kind of like, I know this was 20 years ago, but were we really not aware that people are horrible?
Well, actually, it's really funny. Buffy shot in Torrance, California. That's where the school was set, which was actually one of the places in the 80s that was really heavily affected by the Satanic Panic.
right.
Which, granted, was kind of countrywide, but it kind of started in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah. I mean, this is something that came out, is a very, normal thing. I don't want to say normal thing to have happen, but it is something that has happened in the real world. And presumably that kind of stuff did happen in the Buffyverse.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting seeing the discussion between Buffy and Giles, because at first she's like, what monster did this? And he's like, maybe a human?
Yeah.
And then, of course, she says, is there a loophole in the Slayers don't kill rule? Mm-hmm. And, of course, we'll need that in a few episodes. But does Buffy not think there are actual legal remedies for humans who kill kids?
She does bring that up in a later episode. She doesn't mention it in this one. But I do want to point out Sarah's wonderful acting with the disgust in her voice when she said, someone with a soul did this. Though actually, we will later find out on Angel that there are humans that don't have souls, and actually that does lead to serial killers. It's the episode I've Got You Under My Skin. Just a great episode, but we'll get to that one.
I will say that, once again, Buffy's outerwear is on point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally unnecessary maybe for SoCal, but it is definitely, Buffy has the best jackets. Just reiterating. And really Joyce's jacket is kind of cute, too.
Well, Buffy, got to get that fashion from somewhere. I think
that's true. Joyce has like a mom look, but it's not like uber mom jean. She's like a fashionable middle-aged lady, that kind of, chic gallery owner working it thing.
Yeah, I really do love Buffy's passion for protecting people. Like the whole, just her disgust in this whole thing. That it's what Kendra said, that being the Slayer isn't what you do, it's who you are. I don't think even if Buffy were not, if say Willow were the Slayer and Buffy was in Willow's position, I think Buffy would still be as, go ahead, charge into dangerous situations as she is now.
I agree. Buffy does have a lot of empathy. She can get up in her own head, and her own problems get magnified by her a lot, but then this is a show that works on metaphor, so I understand when Buffy as a character gets sort of wrapped up in their own,
So in the next scene, we get an uncomfortable lunch with Oz and Xander.
Yeah.
Oh, Xander. Do we think that that Oz cares at all at this point?
No.
He's basically just like, are you done yet?
I think at this point, Oz has been like, you know what? I've processed this. I've talked it out with my girlfriend. I've talked it out with my internal self, and I'm over it, and I can deal with this. Moving on. And Xander, being Xander, is just like, whoa.
Yeah, he can't let it go because he knows he's an asshole.
I do wonder if maybe Oz and Xander needed to have a conversation. Because we've obviously seen a conversation between Oz and Willow. And we've had conversation between Xander and Willow, and we even had a conversation between Willow and Cordelia. But there's kind of never been the finish between Oz and Xander. So, considering how taciturn Oz is, I kind of do understand from Xander's perspective, where it's like, please, just tell me what's going on. Do you hate me? Are we cool? Just say something.
And Oz would just be like, yeah, we're cool. Pass the fish sticks. Please do more fish stick theater, because that's the best thing you've ever done.
Amy does look totally cute, though, with that hair. Because we get our reintroduction.
She does. And I'm noticing how the hairdresser is trying to cover up those bad bangs so badly. They're doing a pretty good job, but every now and then just slips one out. So, and Joyce's mission is...
One nice thing I did notice about Xander, he was being very chivalrous and he gave Buffy his chair.
Yes. Although, I think he might have been doing that to distance himself from the awkwardness. Yeah, just from the whole situation.
You can have an ulterior motive and still do something nice, I guess.
It's a multi-purpose chair giving.
And we get a little insight about Willow when Buffy is telling the gang about Joyce coming out, and Willow's like, your mom would take the time?
Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden we learn more about Willow's mother than we have in the entire previous two and some seasons.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever see her again. Do we? We hear about her, but
we never see her again.
Yeah.
We never ever see Ira, so... But kind of with this episode, it's kind of everything you need from the Rosenbergs. Like, you get exactly who they are, and I can understand why they never come back, because it's totally fitting with the character that is set up, and I get the impression that Mr. Rosenberg's probably very similar.
If not even less attentive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even, like, you know, less. This gives a lot of insight into Willow and her, not only backstory, like her mentality, where she's at. Again, I don't love Willow this watch through and the last couple watch throughs, but some of this I'm like, well, yeah, I get it, dude.
Yeah, definitely. I think she's somebody who very much raised herself. So that's kind of why she's got like this I'm very seldom naughty thing going on, because she's always had to take care of herself, so she's had to be responsible. So
yeah. I mean, Ira and Sheila seem to be astonishingly hands-off parents.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that does really kind of fit in with everything we ever learn about them. But it's just like, from just a normal perspective, it's like, wow, you really just spend no time with your kid.
It's a really interesting contrast to Xander, I think, because Xander's parents are also very neglectful, but they're neglectful in different ways. Xander's parents are neglectful in a very aggressive way. Well,
they're present and neglectful.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, they're present, neglectful, and abusive. I think Willow's parents are just, laissez-faire. Yeah, they're just not there. It's a different form of abuse, but it's I think less so than what Xander has to go through. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we get mention in some episodes, season 4, maybe season 5 of I think Xander makes a reference. Correct me if I'm wrong. To his mom making him sandwiches or something, like, when he's living down in the basement. Am I correct?
Maybe.
Possibly.
That sounds reasonable.
Something about that. Something with the mom and here, And so I guess she's around more, but yeah, it's neglectful and abusive in entirely different ways.
Joyce is not only on patrol, she's also at the school, and you can just see Buffy just, my God, Mom.
And does Amy actually know Joyce?
I guess so.
Because she says hi to her, and it's like, I have no idea that you know her.
Well, I mean, also, it's just like Amy suddenly, like, has lunchroom table privileges.
I don't. Well, I know, actually, especially after that spell, you would think they'd be like more like, "Hey, Amy," but they're.
Yeah, that spell was. Look, if that spell was anyone's fault, it was Xander's.
Well, it wasn't. But the fact that she's still doing, the fact that she's still doing spells, and even in that episode, Xander figures out she's still doing witchcraft because she tricks the teacher into taking a paper that's not really there. So
right, but we've never seen any indication that any of them have any problem about people doing magic per se. I mean, Willow's doing magic.
I get the impression that maybe Willow's hanging out with Amy more because she's exploring witchcraft and everything. Though, of course, we do find out in season 6 that Amy at this point is already visiting Rack. It's really weird to actually think about the Amy that we see in season 6, which I guess is the episode Wrecked that she comes back, and think about the fact that this episode, there's like almost there's no time for growth between this episode and Wrecked for Amy. the mess that she is in Rex is basically, she's already there in this episode. We just don't see it.
We just don't see. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. Yeah.
Are you implying that rats can't have personal growth?
Well, they can't visit magic drug dealers.
Oh, true.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so she's in the same headspace here as she's going to be several seasons on, because she doesn't really remember her time as a rat.
No, she doesn't.
It's not like she was conscious in there, which would have been horrible. Like that, the implication of that is even worse, that she sees and hears everything, but is like a rat.
Yeah, in Rex, she says it feels like weeks, and she hopes that Larry asks her to the prom.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
She's not aware of the time that passed. But Buffy decides to get Joyce away from her friends just as fast as possible, because Joyce is starting to tread into dangerous areas. It's like, I know you guys dabble.
I'm a dabbler.
And Joyce's immediate conflation of cult behavior with witchcraft, with witches, is like, oh dear, that's really troubling. Given the world we're in.
I think this episode is really interesting in that obviously there is some magical influence on things, but I'm wondering really how much of this is a spell or magical, and how much is mob mentality.
Well, I think the point is that it's a little bit of both. It's also the way it's sort of like the demon is also playing on what's already there, almost like, an internet troll or a bot or something, where, and it's just pulling out those like inborn fears, prejudices, whatever, and then bringing them to the surface.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I certainly don't think that they're brainwashed. Obviously, these children are going to manifest to Joyce, and that is definitely affecting her. But I think in the late 80s and the 90s, before 99, there was this whole everything that's wrong is a cult, when there were very few actual, like almost none, like the bad things that were happening were not because of witchcraft. They were not because of Ozzy Osbourne. They were not because of music played backwards on a record player. But it got, that in the mindset. So Joyce is probably coming from that mindset, and it's also being colored by what her daughter does for a air quotes living. But I know Joyce's, right? Like, I know the impulse of like something really bad has happened in the world, and I have to figure out how to make it feel better. But part of it is making it feel better for myself, and like trying to find a proactive way to deal with, which is probably a little bit of PTSD from finding 2 dead bodies of children. So,
right. And I was going to add, along with the things that you were mentioning, I mean, this is a little bit later, but when I was in college, there was the whole D&D is going to, playing Dungeons and Dragons, another role-playing game, is also, it's going to lead you to witchcraft. And I think later on it became reading Harry Potter was going to, so it's that kind of thing too, that there's like, there's pop culture things that are just fantasy and people having fun. And we had to turn that into, oh no, it's evil because there's mentions of witches or demons or, supernatural stuff. So therefore it's all, again, part of a cult, and it's all going to kill you. And there's demons living in your basement. So that feeds into it too. Just like this fear of not understanding things.
And also in this situation, as I'm really thinking about this scene, if this was not a supernaturally mystic town living on a hellmouth, Joyce's impulse to go out and organize and that stuff away from the supernatural element of witches and cults is really, really admirable. But in this case and in this scene, Buffy's like, Mom, listen. She's basically saying, let me do my job and let Giles do his job. Because that's what we're here for, because we understand if this is something mystical, we're going to work on this. But Joyce is not I guess I'm not making sense today.
No, I see what you're saying. It's
Joyce knows that Buffy's the Slayer. She knows Giles is the Watcher. She knows that they know how to take care of these things. And she's wrapped up in this thing, and she's not allowing her daughter or the team or the Scoobies to do what they do. She's actually constantly derailing what they do and making it harder. Also, Christina's really pretty, is what I have in my notes.
I think at that time also, that's a little bit after you had the group to change the lyrics to label all the records and stuff like that. So I think there were a lot of well-meaning parents, particularly moms, who were trying to protect their children from the big bad world. And I think Joyce is kind of feeding into that too, where she feels helpless otherwise. And there's all this stuff happening. So she's undermining the Scoobies, not meaning to, because she feels like she knows better and she's got to do something too. She doesn't want to just sit back and be passive. But
right. I mean, like Andy said, I mean, Joyce is doing what under normal circumstances one would do. Some of this is understandable, but it gets magnified eventually to the point where they're literally burning people at the stake. So
I think one of the interesting things about this episode is that basically everything that happens, you know, there are mystical reasons for it, but it's less metaphor than a lot of Buffy episodes are. It's not like this isn't a metaphor for date rape, or this is a metaphor for growing up. This is these satanic panic, moral outrage things, just that happens to have a supernatural influence. Because if you actually read about most of these panics that have gone on, all the way back to Salem, it's all about these stupid rumors that start and then grow into, you know, like people, you know, getting whipped up into a frenzy and hurting people, you know, sometimes killing people, as in Salem, or with, you know, the 80s satanic panics, you had people going to jail who had done absolutely nothing. Because that's just how these things work. And here, I think the demon is speaking to Joyce and kind of, you know, whispering all of these things in her ear, but I don't think it's actually really like putting a spell on her. It's just kind of preying on this fear that's inborn in most people.
Yeah, I think the magnifier for the actual feelings that are there.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a catalyst, but it's almost like it's feeding off the mass hysteria, the mom mentality. And this episode reminds me a little bit of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which is the Twilight Zone,
Good
where
reference.
the aliens are setting an entire town off just by light. And that was a metaphor, obviously, for the Red Panic at that point. But yeah, where it's something that's a supernatural thing that's kind of dropping crumbs, as it were, no pun intended, considering the episode. But then, like, letting it's also it's free will and personal nature to actually then go with it and run with it, instead of being constantly, it was out of my hands, I didn't know what I was doing, I was being forced or brainwashed or whatever you want to say. So yeah, it's a lot of that, I think.
So we're already moving fairly organically into the scene with the vigil, and hey, it's Mrs. Rosenberg.
Wow.
Yes. You know, she's awful. Like, she's so awful, but the actress is just... Did I write her name down? I think I wrote her name down just so I can... It's probably in my notes somewhere, but...
I do have it. The actress is Jordan Baker.
And she's fantastic.
She sets herself up from, like, at the very first moment where she calls Buffy Bunny.
Funny.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, I know exactly who you are.
And of course, she seems more familiar with Joyce than she does with her own daughter. Great.
Yeah.
It's funny because we've never seen her interact with Joyce either. She's kind of like
and also,
her own
like,
little bubble.
When I saw this, I actually kind of had this thing. It's like, wait, Joyce has friends? But no, because, I mean, remember when in Dead Man's Party, she has one friend, and that friend gets turned into a zombie.
Well, I get the impression that they know each other casually, like maybe Joyce dropped Willow off, or Joyce dropped Buffy off at Willow's place every once in a while, because they do say later when they're lighting their daughters on fire,
I love that.
It's, we've got to hang out more, get coffee or something.
We'll get there, but
we should really spend more time together after this.
God. I think what's the great thing about how just horrible, neglectful Mrs. Rosenberg is that it really is implied that she is a child therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Watching this again and you sort of reading into it more, it's like she's academia but not practice. Does that make sense? Because there are people that are researchers and stuff. Because I would hate this to be my kid's child's. Like, I'd be like, no. But like, and she's saying, and my note was, of course you wrote a paper. Of course you did.
I bet she's got a couple of books out there that, were like minor successes about, child development in the 80s.
She strikes me more as an academic than necessarily an actual therapist.
Yeah,
you get the feeling that she goes to all sorts of symposiums and reads papers and interacts. And she's never actually got a practice because she's too busy being an academic / maybe a big fish in a small pond of, people who do this stuff. And as I was watching this, it's like, but I grew up with parents who were both school psychologists, and like our entire family or extended family were guidance counselors and therapists and social workers. I like knew her immediately. I'm like, oh my God, it's that person. I grew up with like so many people like this. It's kind of scary. So, including the hands-off part.
Yeah, it seems like to me that obviously in order to become a psychologist, a social worker, a PhD, all that stuff, a psychiatrist, you have a lot of training and a lot of internship stuff. But then after you're done with all that, you can go into straight academia, become a professor, and don't have any hands-on actual clinical experience anymore. And that feels like that's who Sheila is. She's just, I write a lot of papers. Oh, I read about this thing with, and,
And seriously, the cobbler's children have no shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, of course you wrote a paper. Of course you did.
The scene that just keeps on giving.
It really is.
Because it's like you've got, the band candy sex comedy embarrassment just comes right back. And we're just like, Joyce and Giles just can't even look at each other.
Rumors about us?
Yeah. And then, of course, this is actually a momentous moment. This is the first time, I believe, that any of the Scoobies come face to face with the mayor.
It is. I think so, yeah.
It is.
And
nothing happens.
It's the only episode where the mayor is working as the mayor.
Yeah. It's great. It's like, oh my God, it's the mayor. And he's just kind of there.
He's mayoring.
No interaction, no nothing. Just he's being the mayor.
Which I think is genius. I actually wrote, I'm like, I love that he just comes up and he's not evil. There's no agenda. And he's actually really good at mayoring, right? He's there at an event and a visual as well he should be. Like, I'm not going to make a big deal about why, but he's doing a job that a mayor would do and, thoughts and prayers and all that. But, we've said this before. He wants to ascend to a snake demon, but, he's run the town for 100 years. He's good at mayoring.
I was going to say, this is why he keeps getting, elected over and over again in however many decades he's been doing this, because he's a good mayor.
But it's a really genius bit of writing in that we've had the mayor set up as this evil of the season, and so you have him appear in this, and it kind of sets up this expectation of, it's like, oh, the mayor is responsible for this, because why else would they get Harry Grainer to appear in one scene? And also, what the mayor is saying with this whole never again, and then following it up with Joyce's speech, is that there is this whole Sunnydale syndrome where everybody is kind of ignoring the supernatural until it's really thrust into their face. And Joyce is one of these people who's been able to get past that. And so the mayor is trying to keep up this masquerade of everything's fine, there are no demons. And Joyce is like, no, I'm gonna say a thing.
He's been shown before. It's like he wants the town to be free from troublesome influences.
Yeah, I mean, his whole mission is to keep the Sunnydale syndrome going on and sort of cover it up. And yeah, it is. It's a genius bit of writing to include him in this very short scene, because it also makes you think, before Joyce gets up and gives her speech, that he may have something behind this. What I mean? Like, is he behind this? What's going on? And then you realize, nope, he is not behind any of this stuff. He's just doing his mayor thing.
Yeah. Sunnydale syndrome has to exist, because if Sunnydale syndrome does not exist, then this episode is ongoing. I mean, we saw what happened in The Wish when everybody found out about the supernatural. I mean, granted, that is a different situation because the demons were running the town, but everybody suddenly found out about the supernatural and were super open about it. Do you think that people would be able to live their regular lives? No, they'd be terrified all of the time, and the mayor does want to keep things going the way they are. Sure, he wants to feed babies to a demon every couple of years, but
As you do.
As you do, yeah. That's...
But even in that episode, he was concerned with infrastructure and sewers.
Yeah.
Right?
And Joyce's speech is chilling. And the scary thing is, she's not entirely wrong. I mean, throwing Buffy into it, I think, is a mistake. But everything else she says, it's like, yeah, I kind of got a point.
She does kind of have a point, but bringing Buffy... And you know, I do think that Joyce gets better, and I do love Joyce, and I love Christine, but I was like, really got very angry at her watching this, because she is putting her daughter, not just her daughter, the Slayer, her daughter, the person that she says she loves, into a really bad position and a very dangerous position where something could go really, really wrong. And I think a lot of it is her trauma speaking, the PTSD of it. But I'm still just like, Joyce, you got to stop, think for 10 seconds, and then continue your speech, maybe without having your daughter involved.
Of course, she also does have, like, demon dead kids speaking to her. And
right. I think it's a combination of things. I mean, there is certainly a psychological... She's under a lot of stress and trauma. But there's also these... like dead kids whispering to her. So, so she's not herself.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this is Joyce's real feelings about something about this. So I get it, but I don't know how I feel about Joyce right now. And that's okay. Also,
when she says, the grown-ups should take back the town, this episode is sort of the epitome of my continuing thesis that almost every adult in Sunnydale is useless. So I was like, yeah, grown-ups taking back the town. Not, that's probably not a great idea. Points for determination there, Joyce, but maybe not the best actual plan.
Yeah, we had two good adults there. We've lost one of them, so we're down to Giles and Giles.
There's some stuff that I will bring up once we get to the burning at the stake scene, but yeah. Joyce's talk about witches leads into this ritual, and we see this random kid, and it's like, hey, who are you? But
it's a goth boy.
It's a goth boy. But then we see also Amy's there, and oh my goodness, Willow is there, and it's the symbol that was on the kids. The scene quickly switches to at the school, and we are formally introduced to Michael, who would have been really nice to have seen before.
Or ever again.
Yeah, he's one of those, like, one-time characters that you want to know more about, and he kind of fits in with them, so yeah, it would be very nice.
But I also think that he's a very interesting character to bring in by making him so other and gothy.
And reading is gay, which is very othering, especially in this time period.
But
sorry, I interrupted you.
It's okay. No, I totally understand what you're saying, but it kind of keeps the expectation that this is a spell down. It's like you understand why these jock guys are picking on this guy first. I mean, it's almost like after, sorry, I'm going to bring up very scary real world events, when you had Columbine. And all of a sudden, all of these goth kids are being attacked because, all goth kids want to shoot up schools. And certainly with Satanic Panics, you always had attacks on these goth kids. So yes, somebody like Michael would get attacked before somebody like Willow or Amy.
And again, he is very queer coded. Like, even in the do you know what I'm talking about? Am I way off base?
No, I think you're right on the mark.
He's really, really queer coded, even that little moment. So he has the disadvantage of not only being the goth kid, but also the queer kid. And like, he's not around for very long, and I wish we had seen him again. Because, like, I knew this guy. Like, I'm like, oh, Michael, baby, you and I sat at Denny's until 4 o'clock in the morning drinking bad coffee and talking about, like, drama and singing show tunes in my car. I know that, like, even just looking at him, like, I know this kid. This kid was my friend. And I, like, automatically then just, like, feel really protective of poor Michael. I love that the jocks get scared the minute they see Buffy.
Yeah,
that's what I love about this scene is like the show finally remembered. Oh yeah, people are actually kind of scared of Buffy.
Even the big male jocks.
MC brought up Columbine, and that actually, if I remember correctly, that's not too far in the actual real life future, is it? Because it happened in '99, didn't it?
That is the reason why Earshot is delayed.
Right.
And why
So,
Graduation Day part 2
Yeah,
as
so
well.
it was kind of eerie watching this and going, wait, God, oh, wait, shit, this is, this is going to be more impactful after the fact, because a lot of kids and people that I knew were getting shit because all of a sudden, you're the mass murderer when you were just like a benign kid, or you were just like a baby witch, which I knew many of, and in pagan circles and stuff, or a friend of mine used to call them teeny bopper witches. It was in a not good stop picking on people you don't understand way.
So I pulled out the Sunnydale High yearbook to look up Michael's entry. And
what does it say?
Well,
This I wanna hear.
interesting. His name is Michael Sajak, and one of his nicknames is MC.
Oh.
Yeah. But his activities are math club, dance club, chess club, and tennis.
Tennis.
Yeah.
I think that's just the yearbook writers being super witty, because a lot of the entries, because I have the same Sunnydale High School yearbook that MC does. I love it. And some of the activities they throw in for these kids that are like one-off episode kids are really sly and snarky and stuff, like tennis for the goth kid, right?
Yeah. And Cordelia.
Cordelia.
Contractually mandated Cordelia.
And she's really reverted to form. Ah, sigh, Cordy.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I see these scenes of Cordy being really mean, it makes me think of that Tyra Banks gif of "We were rooting for you." I mean, I know she'll get better again.
I don't know. I feel like it's just another reminder. Sunnydale doesn't deserve you, Cordy.
True.
Also, Buffy's hair looks way better than it did in the men's in this.
And you know what? I have another note. So the bad bangs aren't as hidden when your hair is up, but you're trying. Like, you can actually, especially in a higher def television, right, than I would have had in 1999, I can see where the hairdressers or the hairstylists are trying so hard to disguise those terrible bangs, which I have no idea whose idea. Was that Sarah's idea? Was it the makeup trailer's idea? Like, oh, let's give her some. Oh, no, that was bad. So,
Buffy goes to find Willow and get some books from her. And I like this little bit from between Buffy and Xander, where Buffy's just like, you had an affair with your best friend while you guys were both dating other people. Like, yeah, people are going to judge you a little bit.
That's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, Xander, you really have no right to complain. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Like, that's... And Buffy does. She calls it out in a not mean way.
Illicit smoochies.
Illicit smoochies. I've used that before. But smoochies is one of my very favorite words. Like, I'm like, give me the smoochies. But yeah, she calls it out, and it's nice to see Jane Espenson call it out through Buffy towards Xander, which we have all been wanting to know.
And also calling out how Xander is acting, because he's being really weird with Oz, and it's Oz. Like, he doesn't really say anything, so...
This is right about the time my Shut Up Xander note turns up. This is... for this episode. There's
got to be one per episode. Listeners, you can buy our Set Up Xander t-shirt on Redbubble or TeePublic.
But the little funny scene ends very quickly, because then we see that Willow's got the symbol on her stuff, and...
I do doodle.
You do doodle too.
Yeah. So I was watching, there's on this particular disc on this DVD set, there's a little... like short 10-minute featurette called Buffy Speak, talking about like how they come out. And Jane references this, and she's like, I think Allie did not like me very much. like they basically say in the thing, if it's a funny line, it's Joss, but in this case, this was Jane's line. This was not a Joss line. This was like full on. And if you've ever heard Jane Espenson talk or write or interacted with her, even on her Twitter, that's how Jane talks. Like, I could see Jane Espenson going, I do doodle, you do doodle, we do, like, it's just very Jane Espenson.
It could have been worse. It could have been Jadoon Platoon on the moon and trying to hide a Scottish accent. It switches so quickly. Once we get into the locker search, like, this episode's chilling. Everything that kind of happens from this point on, it's like, this is scary.
Xander, Playboys? really, there are much more explicit things than Playboys around at this point.
Well, I know when
a locker full of Hustler or Wii
Yeah.
or something like that,
I had to shut up Xander because it's like, Xander, nobody cares about your fucking Playboys. Like,
Yeah.
there's not, even if they found your Playboys right now, I don't think you could get in any trouble. Like, they're on a literal witch hunt.
Unless it was the Halloween issue, perhaps, and somebody jumped to conclusions.
Well, it's funny actually with the mention of Playboy. I ended up looking up because within the trivia they're like Charisma Carpenter and Mercedes McNabb and Christy Swanson actually posed for Playboy. So I actually looked up their Playboy spreads. Charisma's got the best
How are
one.
they?
Charisma's got the best one in my opinion.
Of course she does.
She's got a
Okay.
Yeah,
Of course she does.
freaking rockin' body, and they're all very tasteful because it's Playboy and it's all
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
you see boobs.
I've seen Charisma's Playboy spread, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
I just made some incoherent noises there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. When I have a note here because, of course, I have to go on my undying Armin Shimmer in love, and it's just the fact that Snyder was kind of in his element. He is like so turned on by all of this; it's ridiculous. It's creepy, but he's so good at it,
The phrase "pig in shit" occurs here.
Yeah,
it is.
But yeah, Xander really does tick me off because two of his friends are in trouble, and he's just like, I have Playboys, and it's like this. Yeah, it's a witch hunt, and two of your friends are witches. So
no one cares about you, Xander. Really.
Yeah. You do have to wonder what would happen if the spell hadn't been broken on Buffy. But yeah, so Willow did have this protection spell on Buffy for her birthday, and it gets broken, and it's like, wow. Because this birthday is real bad.
Buffy, I mean, it's the running gag that Buffy has terrible birthdays.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And once again, we don't get any in this season, do we? I mean, obviously she has a birthday. She doesn't like,
but there's no birthday episode.
But there's no birthday episode for Buffy, but there's still just that little bit of the running gag still going that Buffy has terrible birthdays or lead-ups to her birthday.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, Helpless is... Because I think Helpless is actually subtitled 18.
Maybe.
I usually see that they, in parentheses, it's 18. But, and as horrible as the rest of this episode is, that little awe of Oz going with Willow because she's in trouble. It's like, I don't think he's going to be let in, but it's still really nice.
No, it's a really sweet, like, yeah, I get that little, as Willow goes, there goes his nation.
Indeed.
And more witch hunting where Giles is getting his books taken away. And this is why you don't keep your books at the school library, Giles.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to give like one point to Joyce. It's like, yeah, why the hell are these books in a public school library?
We've wondered this many times.
In a public school library and being able to be taken out by the students. Like, I mean, I could understand if they were from Giles's personal collection and they weren't in the system.
Right.
Right, or if they were in his office or something, but yeah.
Like, is the Watchers Council just so cheap that they won't pay for Giles to buy books that he has to do it through the school budget?
When I wanted to take out books on the occult and or witchcraft and or whatever, I had to go to the town public library to take them out of our library. I couldn't get the witchcraft books in the school library.
So in my school, I mean, granted, this was elementary school rather than high school, but our copy of The Princess Bride had the back cover cut so that the word bitch was not on the back cover.
Oh, God.
Like, they had cut it out so that you could not see the word bitch.
Wait,
Okay.
the word bitch is on the back of the Princess Bride?
Yeah, it's something like, what if there was a prince who was a son of a bitch or something?
Gotcha. Son of a bitch. That makes a lot more sense. I was like,
Yeah.
what is
But
this?
that word was cut. It was actually gouged out because it was a hardcover. So they like cut. Yeah, it was really. I will never forget that. Though I mean, like the book that it's what Blood Rights and Sacrifice. That's what's in the library.
Right. That should not be on a. I do accept the headcanon that the Watchers Council is so chintzy that Giles is ordering them through the school district.
Well,
Totally.
we do find out in, I believe it's Sanctuary, the episode where the Watchers come to see Wesley on Angel, that they're like, all those alchemists on the board, and we still have to fly coach. So the Watchers Council is canonically cheap, so it's possible they don't pay for books.
You think that, Giles would have like a research section where you couldn't actually take them out or something, but
it's the forbidden section. You need a permission slip from Madam No, not Madam. I'm sorry, I messed up my Harry Potter reference. I should be scolded.
No.
We know what you mean, though. Yes.
Madam Pince, that's it.
Yeah.
I got there eventually.
Snyder says, I love the smell of Desperate Librarian in the morning. That was that spark in their head. They're like, we're totally going to write him as Colonel Kurtz in the episode like that. Do you think that was like sitting in the back of Joss's or the writer's subconscious? Like, do you remember the time that we wrote that line for Armin that was like a riff on Apocalypse Now? Let's do that again. So
we continue on with this witch hunt, and we get Willow trying to have an honest conversation with her mother.
Oh, God.
Oh, God, I would have slapped Sheila so hard.
I mean, honestly, I have an academic bent myself, but even I was like, I want to punch her in the mouth. I'm just like, shut up. Talk like a human.
Sheila starts a line with developmentally speaking, and I had to stop taking notes and record it, and I wrote in my notes, oh, crap, am I Sheila? Because there have been so many times on this podcast where I'm like, well, if you look like Erickson's stages of developmental theory, that's totally where Buffy's at right now. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm Sheila, guys.
The fact that Sheila is addressing this from such an analytical, from her own mindset, really does say to me that it is more of the mob mentality of everybody feeding one another than an actual mystical influence. Because you notice Sheila only gets really upset at Willow in this scene when she finds out she's dating a musician.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the amazingness of the dialogue in this scene?
Oh, yeah.
The line, oh, King Friday lording it all over all the other puppets is gold. I mean, that line is great. So genius. I'm like, Jane Espenson, you are amazing.
I think my favorite line in this scene, it might not be the line, it might be Allie's delivery, but it's, do you see any goats around here? No, because I sacrificed them.
Oh yeah, no, that's actually a great line, but it also a great delivery. It is. Right, I love that.
My notes too is my second favorite line is, do you see any goats around? But just the King Friday line, especially pop culturally for all of us that grew up on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I mean, obviously developmentally, and since she's like a developmental psychologist for kids, no, Sheila, I'm talking as Sheila now. She of course let her kid watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but then also sat there doing feminist deconstruction of it over her child's shoulder. It says, it's not only a funny line, it gives you exactly who Sheila is.
Yeah.
You're Sheila-ing Sheila here is what you're doing.
Yes. It's all very meta.
It's Sheila's all the way down.
And we actually do see a lot of this influence in Willow. A couple episodes back when we got Willow with like the really being very firm about her Judaism, and later on when she brings up the destruction of the Native Americans for Thanksgiving.
100% Sheila.
I think also part of it might influence Willow going straight to gay and kind of skipping over bisexuality. There's a lot of extremes in Willow, and I think a lot of that might come from Sheila, who does seem to have this very extreme personality. And we move from one mother-daughter scene to another with Buffy and Joyce.
Jan mentioned it a little while ago, but my note is, okay, Joyce, are you Tipper Gore now?
Was it the PMRC?
The PMRC, which was the Parents Music Research Council. It was happening around just a little bit before this time frame for our international listeners or younger listeners, which is Tipper Gore Al Gore, Mr. Environmentalist guy's wife.
She was basically the second lady, the wife of the vice president.
Her kids had a copy of Purple Rain, the soundtrack to Purple Rain, and she thought it was pretty cool, Purple Rain, And then the track Darling Nikki, which is like the dirtiest piece of music ever written.
Because Prince writing something dirty? What?
I mean, but this is beyond Prince's. This is... I love that song. It's one of my favorite songs. She heard that and went on this whole, because of her power structure, on this whole campaign to ban bad, so much so that John Denver was testifying in front of Congress about free speech and musical.
The big names were John Denver, Frank Zappa, and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister. My favorite moment from the testimony was basically when John Denver and Frank Zappa came to testify. Al Gore and everyone were like, "Oh, we respect your work," and blah blah blah. And then Dee Snider of Twisted Sister shows up and goes, "So are you going to tell me you respect my work too?" Which is the best part of the entire hearing.
So back to Buffy. That is exactly what Joyce is acting like.
Yes.
Let's ban things. Let's this is all for our children, without actually listening to the feedback of your actual children and knowing what you're. It's like parental responsibility, and parents should be responsible, and they should be talking with their kids about problematic things. I mean, obviously this is a supernatural universe, but you know what I mean, in general. But in this case, it's like those parents that go so far out of their way to protect their children, they're not actually listening to the feedback of their actual children or taking their individual children under consideration of what they could handle or not handle. So that's, my soapbox.
Though, as I said earlier, Joyce isn't exactly wrong about those books not belonging in a school library. Though
they don't.
Yeah.
Though I do feel like most of those books are probably, unless the Watchers Council really is that cheap, most of those books are probably Giles's personal books. So they should just be at Giles's fucking apartment. But we are now getting to the boiling point of this witch hunt. And we get the reveal of the dead kids. And
best line in the scene when Buffy says, "If that's all right with Moo." Greatest acronym ever, a fake in a television show, but just the way it's just great language play. It's great word play.
I wonder how much Jane had to work on that acronym, where it's okay, we need an acronym that works for the group, but then is also super embarrassing. And it's the Society for the Protection of Elvish Welfare.
True.
And it's you do have to work really hard to come up with a bad acronym.
I was going to say also, I know that part of this is kind of a play on Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which is MADD, so it was MAD. But that at least makes sense. The Moo thing is just okay, so we're a bunch of cows, which is pretty damning to the women involved too, but not necessarily undeserved. So
I think this was probably a writer's room acronym, you know what I mean? I love Jane, and her writing is so freaking fantastic in this, but this has got to be okay, guys, let's sit down and brainstorm on the whiteboard all the stupid,
let's erase the whiteboard that says, the cavemen versus astronauts. We got to work out some acronyms here.
We get for Moo, and just the way that Sarah says, "If it's all right with Moo," is fan-freaking-tastic.
Yeah. But after we see the kids, yes.
Yeah, creepy children.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had this whole revelation watching this episode in this moment. I think that Joyce is a better mother, and we see better mothering from her when Dawn comes along. It seems for her, having two kids gives her more balance. So even in the world where we have the implanted memories of Dawn and the universe shift, you can see, sort of looking back on what people say about Dawn and Buffy's childhoods, how much mellower. Am I making any sense? It was just this bing light that went off about how Joyce manages that mothering better with two children instead of just the one.
I also think Joyce might be better with younger children than she is with teenagers.
Yeah.
That maybe definitely is true, but or maybe even more because she has a focus that is not just her teenage Slayer daughter.
Yeah. I definitely think it's a Watsonian thought. From the Doyleist perspective, they just needed to make Joyce a really great mother because they were going to be killing her later that season. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing to like look at. But after the reveal of the dead kids, and little kids in shows like this are always fucking creepy.
Always creepy.
Yeah.
Always creepy.
But we get into Buffy patrolling, and David's obligatory scene. Earn that paycheck, David.
I will say they have an actual conversation.
They do.
Like, he is really supportive. He goes down, he holds space for her, he listens to what she says, he doesn't try to give tons of advice. Like, I actually really ship it in this moment because they're communicating, and this isn't about him, and this isn't about their doomed love. It's just about him supporting this person. So I actually kind of really liked his contractually obligated moment.
Yeah. No, it's a good scene. I mean, they don't overplay it, and it doesn't have the angst that so many Buffy Angel scenes have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a hint of schmoop, but it's needed because we've still got the romance going, or the forbidden romance, etc. So it doesn't bother me the way sometimes I'm just like, okay, stop, I'm drowning in slush here. So
well, and also the way he says, like, he talks about why we keep fighting. Like, there is this very subtle shift happening. Angel's mindset is switching to champion, not just reactor. Like, and the way he speaks in the scene is very much that Angel that we're going to grow to love, that is the champion.
The difference between Buffy and Angel as warriors is that Buffy as the Slayer never had a choice in the matter. It was always a destiny thing, but they've always kind of developed for Angel that it's a choice, that he can, either sink into the shadows or he can actually do something with his life. And I think we are starting to see that now. One of the things about this speech, Buffy actually talking about, feeling like the boy sticking his finger in the duck.
I love that.
I love that bit.
Yeah. It almost mirrors the scene, or it's not mirrors. It bookends with the scene in the prom when Jonathan is giving her the class protector award, because Buffy feels like she's going out and fighting and she's not making any difference, and nobody notices, and the people who do notice just kind of resent her for what she does. But then we see in the prom that actually what she does is super important. People do notice, and not only that, despite all of the horrible stuff that has happened in Sunnydale since Buffy got there, before it was worse, because the class of 99 has the lowest body count of any other graduating class.
Right. And as we know as viewers, which she'll never know, is that in a world where there was no Buffy, it was way, way worse. So it's something that we kind of know that comes in. So she's making a difference whether she is cognizant of it or not.
I also love at the end of the scene, her conversation with Angel sparks her into detective mode.
She's smart. Buffy's smart.
Buffy's smart. And also, I do love how Sarah says no fruit for Buffy.
Are we just going to chalk up the fact that no one, like literally no one, has gone looking for these children's parents to shooty eye beam magic?
That actually bothered me, because as soon as I saw the dead kids, and granted, I've seen the episode before, so I knew it was happening. But that's the first thing, is like, you find dead children, don't you try to identify them or find their families or put up, even like, we found these 2 John and Jane Does. Does anybody know who these children are? Nothing like that at all. It's just like, I mean, and maybe that's tied in with the demon stuff, but it's frustrating. Okay.
It is definitely Sunnydale syndrome, because you know that the police department, with all of these murders and deaths that happen in Sunnydale, they are not investigating all of them because they couldn't, because none of them are going to lead anywhere. And with somebody like the mayor around, he's going to tell them to just, like, ignore it. And we know that the police are tied in with everything, because it's like, oh, we'll say it's a gang on PCP. I don't know where the pictures of the kids actually came from. We will accept it as, the demonic influence, but I think the fact that nobody questioned, that nobody ever found the parents, came from the fact that this is just the way Sunnydale is.
You don't think, like, just local newspaper people would have, like, done the least amount of investigating? I mean, like, the police, yeah, you're right. They wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
Not in Sunnydale.
Well, so are you saying there is no local news?
No, I mean, and like, so when
they have an airport in Sunnydale, but they don't have a local news show.
If you remember in Once More with Feeling, Xander picks up the newspaper, and it says everyone breaking into song, demons definitely not involved, says officials.
Okay.
So that's kind of the level of journalism we've got in Sunnydale.
This episode especially, I don't always see it, but this very much reminds me of Stephen King's Derry.
Yes.
Where everyone is so, which is the universe of It, where the supernatural controls, the whole, like, it makes people really blind to what's going on. So no, in this case, and their local news is definitely not local news. It's out of like LA news, or out of a bigger market news, because they actually, like, if it was news that actually was being recorded in Sunnydale, they wouldn't be able to talk during hush.
They've got a newspaper. That's probably about it.
I mean, my one quibble, and it's not a big thing, is that even like since the parents are so involved, you think they'd at least put out flyers or something. Even there'd be no response to it, but just like somebody might be. It's easy enough to just kind of.
Thematically, that really works. That nobody has bothered to look to see who the parents of these children are.
If you actually think about it, these two kids mean nothing. They're catalysts for everything. So the fact that they have been completely left behind, and what exactly does this mean? And it turns out it's something nefarious. So yeah, I do think that it's fitting that the adults in Sunnydale should not really care. The gang go to the library and are trying to work out what's going on, and Giles yelling at the computer is adorable.
It's so precious.
This is how you know things have gotten desperate. Giles is using a computer.
And I just love Buffy is so brilliant. She's just so smart. And in terms of like direction and cinematography, the shot of their little faces each around that computer, it's really precious. And second of all, it's really a well-balanced shot. So like, yay director, yay DP. Like, I just found it to be a really well done piece of direction.
And yay, Oz taking an active role in Scoobying.
Yeah.
Like filling in for Willow, and it's nice. I like it. And I love that it's 1998, so a mother's first instinct is not taking away a kid's computer when she's grounded.
Right.
They've updated their computer game because that is laptop. Unlike back in Robot Eugene, where there was that Mac Portable that was like, oh my God, where'd they find that?
Yeah.
But more interesting, missed a chance for product placement there because they've got a sticker over that apple.
Mm.
It's true. Yeah, they do have a sticker over that apple.
Yeah.
Maybe on purpose at that point.
Quite possible.
Yeah. And the return of Detective Buffy is always welcome to me.
And I like Detective Scoobies because they're all investigating this. And Oz being able to translate Gilesese.
Of course he can.
What they do in this, like tying it to fairy tales, bringing up Hansel and Gretel, and then tying it to the Salem witch trials. It's well thought out.
That's actually one of my favorite literary, fantasy, whatever show. It's like one of my very favorite things is when a show or a book takes pre-existing mythology and like breaks it down into this really, like, this is like the shit that Neil Gaiman does, and he's like my favorite writer. Supernatural actually does it pretty well sometimes, but like for sure that whole Neil Gaiman American Gods kind of, it's just one of my favorite literary tropes, so I'm always glad to see it.
I was just going to say, I'm surprised Sheila didn't bring up Bruno Bettelheim at that point, but
exactly.
Because that's one of my favorite tropes too. And for those who don't know, Bettelheim was sort of a psychologist, anthropologist who talked about the whole, like, a lot of the dark parts of actual fairy tales instead of the sanitized like Disney versions. So all the sex and violence and how that like works in psyche. And also Angela Carter, who's one of my favorite writers, who did that a lot also. She's one of Neil Gaiman's favorite writers. She did stuff like In the Company of Wolves.
In the Company of Wolves is brilliant. Total book rec right there. It's so good.
Yeah. So again, a favorite trope of mine also. And they did it really well because it just kind of, especially with the flip and that, oh, well, maybe Hansel and Gretel weren't weren't actually the good guys in this. So.
Fun little bit of trivia, since they do get into the Hansel and Gretel is real and the witch was innocent. Emma Caulfield, who plays Anya, actually goes on later on in Once Upon a Time to play the witch from Hansel and Gretel.
Nice.
Yeah.
I also think this is a really, getting back to Sheila, because they go back and forth a little bit.
They do. It's very back and forth scene.
Back and forth. And I think this is really interesting And we had that episode really recently, and both our episodes where parents are affected by something supernatural and become focused away from the actual problems of their children. And it's interesting that both are written by Jane, who I think actually has a really great understanding of that dynamic. So I just thought that like they're really interesting bookends in Jane's like season 3 career. So
especially since they're so close together. It's not like you kind of had a throwback later on. It's like almost a recurring theme with her, which is great. So.
Yeah, no, I think she handled it so deftly, and I think it's just, we talked about how Jane's entry into this universe is one of the best entries by a writer.
Now, when we get Michael running into the library after having been beat up, shit really starts to get real. And we figure out just how in danger Willow is and Buffy is, and I love panic on Oz's face as he figures out that Willow is in danger from her mother. It's very subtle acting on Seth's part, but it's really good. And one thing that I did mention that I was going to bring up before, and I will bring it up now, I find it very interesting that once we actually get to the point of, which we're kind of at the point now where we're going to get people put at the stake. All of the people put at the stake are young women.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's historically kind of accurate in terms of witch trials and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
actually there should be some older women, but there aren't. So
yeah, because Giles has been in trouble throughout this episode because they're his books that they're using to light the fire. Michael is beat up, but he is not taken away.
Yeah.
And Xander and Oz are, while they're not witches, certainly somebody like Moo would see them as culpable. But all of this violence is focused on these young women. And they had the opportunity to take Giles. They left him.
Part of that goes back to the whole kind of muddy question of how much mystical influence is going on here. Because the demon, as the kids, keeps referring to the bad girls.
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Specifically.
For sure.
I think we've uncovered a misogynist demon.
Yes.
I mean, granted, a lot of the demons are misogynistic.
Right.
Well, I mean, and it's really interesting because it is the Hansel and Gretel myth that the conflating of a single woman alone in the woods living on her own, right, equals witch, right?
That's very much the whole crone myth thing.
Like the crone myth thing, and it's again, I just think this mythological thing, it's one of my favorite tropes because the gang figures out how far back it's gone and into the lore, and then Xander wants to trade his cow for magic beans, which Nikki's delivery on that line is great. I just needed to point that out.
I just wish Xander took things more seriously. It's like,
I know.
his friends are in, like, this is seriously, I think, one of the most terrifying episodes.
It really
what
is.
happens to the girls, because it's
like,
there is a supernatural influence, but this is their families that are doing it to them.
It's chilling when Sheila says, it's funny, but chilling when she says, get your coat, it's chilly out.
Historically, I mean, the two different groups that usually were targeted by witch hunts or, satanic, whatever, were either older, as we said, older single women, usually living on their own, or young women, because there was a lot of sexual component, and also where, especially when they turned somebody down, they suddenly became, oh, well, she's a witch because she tried to seduce me with her powers and blah, 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 and it gets turned that way. So the fact that our victims here are all young women is actually very telling. So it kind of ties in with all that, too.
And I mean, of course, this doesn't show up in Buffy because you never ever see a person of color in Buffy, but there is in Salem there was a racial element to it because it's like, it's a slave who started this whole thing.
And of course, one other thing that you have to love here is, hey, we're burning witches, let's burn some books too while we're at it.
Oh
yeah, no, it's this very interesting dichotomy where it's like we're going to burn young women, but what the men get is their books burned.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, the scene with Sheila telling Willow to get her coat. It's so strange. It's like, because it's like she's concerned about her daughter, but then she's gonna kill her. So.
And it's a well-delivered line.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with Joyce, because when Joyce is chloroforming Buffy, And she turns to the little kids and she's like, you were right, it was easy. You could tell Joyce had a lot of reservations about it, and these little kids were just like needling at her just over and over again. Like, I doubt Joyce has had a moment's peace without these two, like, standing over her, telling her about the bad girls since it happened.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
But actually, I mean, it kind of reminded me a little bit of, the previous episode in terms of Angel and the First Evil. When it first started, I almost, like, I was rewatching it the first time, I almost forgot that there was a demon behind it. I was like, is this the First Evil now, like, targeting Joyce and stuff?
That would have been interesting.
If only they had any idea that the First Evil was ever coming back.
Are we at the point where we can talk about, like, the lovely little comedy scene between Giles and Cordy?
Oh.
I think we are, yes.
Right, because it's just, there's not, like, tons of, like, but you get the best line, which is someday you're going to wake up in a coma.
And also it's funnily, horrifically called back in the fact that at, the end of things, when we get to You're Welcome, Cordelia will wake up in a coma.
And I like the way this episode is structured, because you do get that kind of lightness with the Cordy Giles. And I love Cordy Giles interactions, but
yeah.
I've said this again, David has said it. We've all said how funny Charisma Carpenter is. While I was watching her just be brilliant at comedy and such great comic timing, I went to look up her IMDb, and she works. Charisma has been working steadily,
Mm-hmm.
but all her roles are like one-offs on procedurals.
Yeah.
And her the things that she's really gifted at aren't, like, the last time Charisma got to be, like, funny and playful and interesting was her episode of Supernatural with James Marsters.
Oh, yeah, she was very funny.
Where she actually gets to do this kind of really broad comedy, but other than that, she's, like, one episode of CSI, one thing of Chicago PD, and it's just, like,
Didn't she have a recurring role on Veronica Mars?
That was that was before.
But that was a while ago.
Yeah.
That was a while ago, yeah, but it's post-Buffy.
It is post-Buffy, so she had a role on that, and she's really great in that. But all her stuff post that has all been really, like, one episode of Chicago Fire, one episode of this, one, stuff that's very procedural. Or she's, like, the girlfriend in The Expendables, and, she's not, what she's really good at is not valued. So it's just, that's my tangent about, like, how amazing I think Charisma Carpenter is even in her contractually obligated scenes with Giles.
Well, just to get back to Cordelia as a character, I do love talking about Charisma, but Cordelia as a character, as funny as this scene is, I love that Cordelia realizes how serious the situation is, and her first instinct is to go to Buffy. And we get Oz and Xander, and with all of the awkwardness that has gone on through the episode with Xander and Oz, like, we don't know if Oz really cares, but there's definitely awkwardness from Xander's side. The fact that the girls are in danger, they're putting that all aside, and they're just going to try and rescue them. I love it.
I think this is the resolution of Xander being uncomfortable around. We said, wouldn't it be nice to have a conversation? I think this is their unspoken conversation. Yeah. Because you don't see them ever having a problem, or Xander having a problem.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, we don't see the whole guy thing on the two of them talking on screen, partially because I think it's that the guys don't really talk about their feelings and stuff. It just becomes like a kind of, they wave it off. It's understood without getting into that whole deep emotional conversation.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of grunting involved, but yeah.
Yeah. Just so we're clear, you guys are nuts, right? Oz is so fucking underused. Like, I think if Oz had gotten more stuff like this to do, Seth Green might not have left.
Yep.
True. Very true.
And I mean, granted, it is all based around the fact that he wants to save Willow. I do think he wants to save Buffy too, but it is mostly a Willow thing. And then we have the girls at the stake, and Joyce and Sheila bonding. Because they're going to go get coffee after all of this, because...
Yeah, let's go burn our kids, and then we'll go have coffee and a scone somewhere.
We talked about this in relation to the mayor and to Snyder, and the whole banality of evil thing, which seems to actually be coming up in season 3 a lot, now that I think about it. And it's that same, and it's such a great, both of the actresses play it so well, and it's funny, but it's again, it's like the coat line, it's this chillingly, it's this banality of parents not really knowing what their kids want or need, and they're not listening. None of them were listening. Yeah, Christina's another one. She's so funny, that doesn't get credit about how funny Christine can be with her delivery and comic timing. So I just stand out for me. Yeah. That's how to do comedy there, ladies.
And now we have a very memorable moment in the Buffyverse, because it will go on for, 3 more seasons at this point? And that's Amy becomes a rat.
Enough with the Hecate.
As you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
She really didn't think things through. Like, I mean, as bad as the situation is, how was she planning to get out of it?
Well, my question is, like, did Amy turn herself into a rat on purpose? Or was she trying to turn
everyone else into rats?
Other people into rats, and the spell just went wrong?
Possibly. I don't know.
I'm kind of unclear on that.
Well, she said something about filthy creature, so I thought, but it's singular from what I remember, so I thought she was trying to turn herself into something. Maybe Hecate's just like, stop invoking me, this is not my thing. Here, shut up now.
It is the exact same spell that she uses in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, so I think
that she uses kind of on Buffy.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of the standard spell.
Amy episodes are pretty Hecate heavy.
I think she's meaning to do this not to herself.
Okay.
Like, I think about, I honestly think that, because she has used this spell and turned Buffy into an actual rat. So yeah, and then like when Buffy's threatening everybody after Amy's turned a rat, she's like, you in the back, you'll be a fish.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite lines. Like, Sarah's delivery of you in the back will be fish is so good. Right. Yeah. And then Giles and Cordelia are driving to save everybody.
It's so much exposition, but
I don't
putting
care.
Putting exposition in Tony's mouth is the way to put exposition in your plot, because he does it so well, you know.
Exposition in Tony's mouth being said to Charisma is really good, because it feels natural, and those two are so funny together. I wish they had had more scenes together.
And it does feel natural, because of course you're always gonna, to this Cordy, not later Cordy, she'll explain a lot of things on Angel that she figures out, but in this Cordelia and Sunnydale, she's the right person to deliver exposition to, because Giles knows he's going to have to tell her what's going on, and because she's not going to get it.
So things really start to like move very quickly from here on out. With like everything is like back and forth in like minute-long scenes, but we get like the guys playing action hero because they're like going through the vents.
And like we've talked about, sometimes when these fight scenes or action scenes happen, we are like, oh, kicky, punchy, fighty. This one is really good because it's not kicky, punchy, but it's just this, what the guys are doing, what Giles and Cordelia are doing, what the girls are doing. It's a really well balanced without it being kicky, punchy, fighty.
Yeah.
So I really like it.
Then it goes back to the girls, and Buffy kind of realizes what's going on with Joyce, and, you know, can like see that these kids are talking to Joyce, and it's like, dead kids are talking to you, like, what are you doing? And a little bit of Ripper, little tiny bit of Ripper is hot, but they get in, and Cordelia's, it's like we've had the boys like up in the vents playing action hero, but Cordelia's the one who actually saves them.
Cordy's awesome,
but also sprays down the mob.
Yes,
I love her spray. I know, and
also it's like, Cordy, put out the fire.
But I do like her hosing down the mob of idiots, because they deserve to be hosed down.
And after Giles does the spell and the two kids become the big demon, I love the way Charisma says, I like the two little ones.
Little. The way she says the word little.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's, yes, you're right. I'm like, I crush on her so hard when she just little.
For a demon that we only see for like a couple of minutes, it looks really good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
the morph is very 1999, but whatever. The creature itself is really it's pretty well done. Yeah. Get the bad girls.
Not as convincing in that outfit.
No.
And this seems to happen a lot this season, and it's not a detriment to the season. I actually think it's in its favor. A lot of the demons, the one-shot demons that they have, they don't have these big fight scenes with them because they really don't matter. It's not about that. It's about everything leading up to that.
Yep.
And I particularly love it in this episode when it's like Buffy breaks the stake and is just like, did I get it?
Yeah, I think I like this episode way more than I ever realized I did. Yeah, no, Sarah's did I get it is gold.
Her delivery is
Gold.
really good. It breaks the tension, and then the boys falling through the ceiling.
Right, because the boys actually, as much as they wanted to help, did
Nothing.
Yeah. No.
The women saved themselves from the burning stake, which I think is really, I actually really like that the boys don't save the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the show purposefully, it's a show about a woman who's strong and a superhero. So, of course, the boys can't save the day.
I think especially in this episode, when you do have this coded misogyny, where you have all of the girls being victimized, having Cordelia and Buffy being the ones to do the heavy lifting in terms of saving, I think is very important. Because, I mean, even Giles, like his making the demon reveal itself, is very secondary to what Cordelia and Buffy do.
Yeah, I think it's a very important message, too. So I'm glad that they keep to the message and the theme of the show in general.
Is this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of the very last true Monster of the Week episodes that we get, right?
This season?
Just in general. I mean, we have some monster, like obviously Sweet in the musical is a Monster of the Week.
There's
and
Monsters of the Week.
In terms of structure, this feels like a real monstery. Like, look, this is the monster that we're going to play with, not a monster that is. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would disagree
like
with that. I can name a bunch of them off the top of my head. Yeah. I mean, even this season, in the Zeppo, we get the zombies, which only turn up in one episode, and the demon dogs. Yeah. We get the penis monster in Double Meat Palace. So yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
We do get Monster of the Weeks. They are just they're a lot more hidden because you get more running plot lines that kind of are peppered through.
I think that's what it is. It's just not fully like, here's our monster, here's our plot. It's self-contained within this 45-minute time frame. Yeah, I think we'll definitely get some Monsters of the Week, but in terms of structural Monster of the Week episodes, that's not tied into the larger plot. This one feels like one of the final, like, this is the monster, and it's not wrapped up in much.
You mean standalone episodes too, right?
I get what you're saying, but I think it gets more.
Yeah,
things get more plot archy as we go along.
Fair enough.
That's what I mean.
Fair enough. I can understand that. The biggest bit of arc, I would say, is the Joyce's acceptance of Buffy as a Slayer, which you can get from context in this episode. So yeah, this is very much a standalone episode, and we're gonna get less of those coming along.
Yeah, I think I meant standalone. I think I didn't mean Monster Week. I think I meant standalone. Yeah,
I think that's where you were going with that. Yeah.
Yes, wrong words, right sentiment.
It's fair enough, because, I mean, Monster of the Week is often used with Buffy to talk about standalone episodes, so they are used interchangeably a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's also, I think, goes back to the X-Files when you would talk about mythology versus Monster of the Week. My brain captures on to that sort of language because I was also very much watching the X-Files at the time.
Well, because the X-Files was so big, Buffy did use the Monster of the Week
format.
But we get to our final scene, and it's our little denouement scene, and it's a nice scene of the girls hanging out together, and I love scenes of the girls hanging out. And I also
and then Oz has to come over for
Oz has to come over for dinner. But I like that Buffy's helping out Willow with magic. We don't see that a lot, and I have to wonder why Michael's not helping her. Because I mean, they seem to have like a little. It seemed like they were in a coven together. Like that's what was going on, but that doesn't get followed up on again. But
which is too bad because, like, this queer-coded goth kid, I want to see more of that kid, but that's just me.
Yeah, I would love to. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen him again, even if he was just like Jonathan level recurring character. Just because he just disappears. He's there, he's important in the story, then he just disappears, and it would be kind of neat to have Willow have some other, magical friend who kind of understands her and is also, but it's different. So
if I recall correctly, they did like Michael and they had thought about bringing him back, but the problem was because this was so close to the end of high school that when they did come up with some like high school characters, they couldn't figure out a way to organically bring them into the next season. So I kind of get that, but it also is kind of a bummer. Because, I mean, you could have your townies like Xander, or also it's UC Sunnydale. I'm sure there's a lot of Sunnydale kids that are going to end up going there.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, and also just from personal experience, even if you went away to college, you come back home, you still have your local friends that you hang out with. Or at least I did, you know, until you go back to school. So, like I said, he could have shown up on occasion, but it is a bummer because he was interesting.
I was also very enamored of the color of the smoke. It was just a really pretty pink. Nice way to go out on a visual pretty. You know.
So, going back to 1999, back on the early days of the internet and internet theories back in those days, there was a theory going around that I was kind of wondering about up until we get to Something Blue, that they got the wrong rat.
That's, you know, I as theories go, I love that it's just like some normal freaking rat that's just like hanging out. I like the theory. Good job, early internet adopters.
Yeah, that was the theory up until Something Blue, and that Something Blue makes it very clear that it actually is Amy. I will bring this up again in Wrecked. But, I mean, there's not going to be a very natural place for me to bring this up in future episodes, but I do judge the fuck out of Willow. The fact that she gives up on helping Amy very, very quickly. I mean, I think we get one more mention of how's the whole Amy thing going, and she talks about how she got her, like, this whole habit trail, and she's like, oh no, like, the spell's not working yet. I think Willow just fucking gave up, and she, frankly, forgot about Amy, and that's really kind of not cool.
She forgot about her and just stopped thinking about her as Amy and more of like that pet rat.
She dehumanized her,
Yeah, she's like, I mean, I'm not saying she didn't feed and take care of a rat. She obviously did. But she switched her mindset from this is my friend that needs rescuing to, oh, look, I got a pet rat.
Yeah, and obviously we will get into it when we get to Wrecked, but she does not even attempt to bring Amy out of it until she's lonely and needs a friend.
Which really sucks.
And a friend who will
enable her.
Yeah, enable her. That's the perfect term. Oh boy, we're going to have a lot to talk about when we get to season 6. So I think, final thoughts on Gingerbread.
I think it's a good episode. It's different. It really is. It kind of has a very different texture to most of Buffy. Maybe that's not quite the right word.
No, that's definitely... I know what you're saying. The antagonists in this episode are not only humans, but they're people that are supposed to love and protect our main characters. So
but that's a trope that I actually love. You know, as I said, like the monsters are due on Maple Street, or the episode of Torchwood's Countryside, where you find out that, you know, the enemy really is, the real monsters are us, which is, I mean, granted, there is like the supernatural catalyst in this, but basically the parents are the monsters, if you think about it all the way through.
Since you've mentioned it twice, I will say to all of our listeners, if you have not watched The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street and the remake The Monsters Are on Maple Street, which is from the original Twilight Zone and from the 2000s version, they're both really good episodes, and they both have twists in them, which I will not reveal because
don't spoil it,
because they're really great twists.
Really great.
But they are remakes, and they are relevant for they're different twists, and they're both really, really good.
That's one of the tropes that I like, where you find out that the real monsters aren't the aliens or the demons or this or that a lot of it is coming from people's own, the base part of humanity, which unfortunately is way too relevant.
I think this episode, my feelings toward it, now that we're talking, you know, final thoughts, is I'm way more into this episode than I think I ever was before. And I'm really sorry for being Sheila all the time on the podcast. Like, next time I do it, I'm going to continue to do it, because you know I will. You'll be like, what up, Sheila?
Yeah,
I'll continue what I'm saying, but I will take the loving jibes at my, you know, it's what I do. It's what I know. It's like my educational background is the theater stuff and the acting and the child developmental stages, clinical psychologies.
If you start to get too deep into it, we will go, you know, careful there, Sheila.
Just say back off, Sheila. But I found this episode really compelling. It zips along. It's really well paced. The acting is really on point. I love real world, quote unquote, like explanations for mythological stuff, because like Neil Gaiman stuff is my crack. I really like this episode way more than I ever thought I did.
Yeah, I sort of have a love-hate with it. I like it. I like the storytelling. I just, my one issue with it, but that's personally, it's just, I think the parents are so horrible that it's discomforting to me, because I want to just like scream and shake somebody and say, stop it. But that's just because my reaction to mob, mass hysteria, mob mentality kind of thing. Stop being a sheep. Don't follow the herd. Figure out what's going on. But it has a happy ending, so we're good.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I sit on this episode. It's like, this is a really good episode for me, but it's an uncomfortable episode to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's really, really good, but it's also like, I don't know if I can sit here.
I think when an episode does that to us, it actually shows like good writing, good plotting, good good metaphor. So I kind of like it when things make me uncomfortable. And this is one of those ones that makes me uncomfortable, but I think really works in its uncomfortability. Unlike other episodes that I think are meant to make us uncomfortable, that I'm like, that's just gross.
I have to say about this episode is we've had a lot of episodes that we've said, it's like, I want to like this episode, but because of what we're doing for the podcast, like breaking everything down, I don't enjoy it as much. I think this episode is the exact opposite of that, where it's like, this is an okay episode, but when you actually like dig into the meat of it, it's really a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
I think it is the converse of stuff we usually do, yeah.
In terms of trivia for this episode, I've only got one note for this, and that's when they're going through the articles about the dead children. At one point, the author for one of the articles is Howard Fine, which is a reference to the Three Stooges.
Yep.
And that's just a small thing. That is somebody in, I guess, the props department. I don't know if they actually get to like write up texts. I mean, I know like for big movies, they will actually like buy like pre-made texts. But somebody somewhere along the line was just having fun with that kind of stuff, and mad respect for that. I love these little, like, blink if you miss it, fun inside joke things. So, I think, yeah, that's it for Gingerbread. We all kind of enjoyed it and really like digging into it. So, next week we will probably have less fun because it's Buffy's birthday, and Buffy's birthday is never fun.
And that's never good.
No. She just needs to stop growing older.
I'll have lots to say, yeah.
But next time we'll be reviewing Helpless. So until then, grr, arg.
Grr to the arg, yo.
Grr, arg.
Grr, arg.
We'd like to thank everyone who downloaded the podcast, and an extra special thanks to everyone who shared, liked, and subscribed on social media. If you'd like your questions or comments read on the show, you can contact us on our website, returntothehellmouth.com, on YouTube, Tumblr, and Facebook at Return to the Hellmouth, on Twitter at HellmouthReturn, or on email at returntothehellmouth@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read your comments on the show. Be sure to rate our show at iTunes and Stitcher, and check out our show merchandise on TeePublic and Redbubble. See you on Tuesday.
Grr, arg.